What's going on, everybody? This is Brandon Gingelbach at the Fort Worth Chamber of Commerce. We're so pumped to have you for Leaders Online, our virtual learning series. Today, we've got Judy Gaman. Judy, I'm going to get it, Judy Gaman, like backgammon.
That's right.
She's so wonderful to join us today. Judy's going to cover emotional needs and fears of employees and customers as people are coming back from COVID-19, how to get good customer service while staying safe. Should I test my employees as they come back to work? What are the risks and benefits of that? And how do I go forward in this new normal with my eyes open? So we're really excited to have Judy. She's gone around to a couple of chambers. If you don't know who she is, she's a nationally syndicated radio host and CEO of Executive Medicine of Texas. She spent nearly a decade as a voice of the Staying Young radio show, which was nationally syndicated on 48 stations. When she's not working on the new podcast she has, Stay Young America, she serves as a healthy living expert for Fox News and many other media outlets. She's a 5-time author and has appeared on numerous large network programs, including Fox News Radio, Good Morning Texas, and San Diego Living. So Judy Gaman, I got it right. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to hear from you today.
Thank you so much for having me and bringing me into the chamber to talk about this. It's such an important topic, and I'm going to share my screen now, if that's good.
Perfect.
With you.
You do that, and I'll remind everybody, we've got our chat function, so you can leverage the chat function or the Q&A function to be able to ask questions. And we can, I can interrupt when appropriate while Judy talks and ask her some few questions, or we can do questions at the end. So with that, Judy, thanks so much. I can see your screen, and take it away.
Okay, great. Well, although I could talk medically to you for an hour, I think today we're going to really focus, like you said, on some of these emotional things and customers and your employees. I know as the CEO of Executive Medicine of Texas, we see so many people in the C-suite that are just trying to kind of hold it together. We all know that the recommendations, they tend to change pretty much daily as we find things out. And really, that's not necessarily anybody's fault. It's just that we're all in new territory globally. So let me see if I can get to the next. There we go. So today's topic, here's what we're going to do. We're going to understand the emotional needs of our employees and our customers, even ourselves a little bit as business owners and leaders, and how to give good customer service while still staying safe. And should I test my employees? Wow, we get that question a lot. And I'm going to kind of go through the do's and don'ts of that. And then going forward in our business with our eyes wide open. This isn't something that we can have what we call ostrich syndrome, where you just kind of put your head in the sand to pretend it's not happening. And it is happening, and we just have to all kind of know, how do we gauge through this? And one of the first things we need to do is understand emotional needs, just basic emotional needs. These are Maslow's emotional needs hierarchy, and you may be familiar with them. You maybe had Psychology 101, they're covered here. But we look at things from the bottom up. So physiological needs, those are like, do I have a roof over my head? Do I have food to eat? A shelter? All those things are really physiological needs. Then we get into, am I feeling safe? Or something happening that's affecting my safety? And then we go up into love and belonging. Kind of in this love and belonging is that space where social media kind of happens. Do people think I'm important? Do they like me? All these things. And then self-actualization, when you really realize that some of the things you worried about in love and belonging don't really matter as much, because you're kind of just happy in who you are. We normally, as business owners, are functioning in the love and belonging and the self-actualization with our customers, with our employees, and even with ourselves. Because the bottom two, they're there. We're, most of us aren't really worried about where our next meal is going to come from. We're not worried about how are we going to pay the electric bill, things like that. And safety, for the most part, we feel safe in our neighborhoods, safe in our environments. So all these things where we've been, the space where we've been as business owners and business leaders is up in those top 2 tiers. We don't know how to manage not just ourselves, but our employees and our customers in those bottom 2 tiers because we haven't had to do that. And never in our history, now this has been for our ancestors, but in our history, we've never been in a space where we've actually had to do that, not just with ourselves, but with those employees and with those customers. So we're trying to meet needs of other people, or we're trying to have our own needs met. And what has that created? A lot of fear, a lot of confusion, a lot of frustration, and unfortunately, a lot of high emotions. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about an experiment I did about a month ago. And hang with me because you're going to be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe she did this. I went on Facebook and I put that I was going to go to local businesses and I was going to kind of give them a grade, how they were doing as far as did I feel safe and things like that. I just wanted to see the reaction. And what I found was overwhelmingly, there was a mixed bag. There were people who owned businesses that said, this is a terrible idea. We're doing the best we can. Oh my gosh, reviews would hurt us. There were customers saying, yeah, this would be helpful. Some people are saying, I have autoimmune issues. I would really like to hear from someone who is in the medical field that kind of says, yeah, this is a safe place. But the idea wasn't necessarily to drive anything away from any business or to see how they would accept, here's a review and here's what you could do better. It was to say, are we fighting with our customers? Are we seeing eye to eye? Are we appreciating all the emotions, not just from our employees, but the people who keep our businesses alive? Matter of fact, I had made a comment in the chat of all this while it was going on to a business owner who said, I don't want to know, I just want to survive. And I made the comment of, well, a business without customers is a very expensive hobby. And I got unfriended. She goes, it's time for me to unfriend you. And I thought that is so interesting because that's business 101. Anyone who's been in a business class has heard that. Those weren't my words. Those are words of wisdom that have been passed down. So really the whole point of that experiment was just to drive home, and it drove it home even more than I could have ever imagined, that there's such high emotions that sometimes we're not even thinking through what we're saying, how we're handling interactions, even our online presence, because we're at a heightened state.
So Judy, that's just so true. I mean, it's everyone has such different thoughts and ideas on how they think and how they feel, and as the chamber person, you know, for one person there's not enough you can do safety wise, and then other people are like, dude, this is just a hoax, and the emotions are so strong, and I can't wait to hear what you're going to tell us, because it is so confusing to me on what their best response is and how to meet people where they are, and maybe how to get people who are on one's particular side feeling comfortable. So I can't wait to hear.
Well, and you're absolutely right. It's really all over the place. And what kind of made me think I wanted to do this experiment was that particular day I had gone out to 4 different businesses. And you got to remember, a month ago, we were just kind of starting to get out. And I went to one business that I really, really like, and I've been there a lot. And someone who works there that knows me said, oh, great, you're going to wear a mask and make me feel bad? And made fun of me as a customer that I wore a mask in there. And I was just shocked that had happened. And then on the flip side, I had gone to another place, which is kind of a chain. It's a larger store, and they were handing out masks at the door. And they were very polite. You know, they would say, can we provide you with a mask? Would you like a mask? This is yours free. They were trying to encourage people to wear masks. And the response from some customers was, oh, wow, thanks so much. Oh, gosh, I forgot mine. I'm so glad. I was worried about coming. And then you had customers that said no, and they were—
I want one. Don't give me a mask.
Yeah, they were so angry. Why are you giving me a mask? This is stupid. And they're like telling them off. holding up the, people coming into their store. And that's really what prompted my little experiment, because I wanted to kind of see how would people take that feedback if it was provided to them. Would they be accepting? And I was shocked how many business owners don't want the feedback, or said they didn't want the feedback, or they took it as it would be a ding on them or against their company. A few of them said, yes, but I'd like that privately. I would like somebody to just let me know, and then I can make the choice on how to help or what to do. So that's kind of the story behind the story. But good customer service, of course, meets all these needs. Now, not the self-actualization, that's really something you kind of do on your own, but how do we make them feel that they have safety, security, that they're a lot of them are afraid, maybe they lost their job. Is this the best spend of my money, spending it at your company? So all of those needs are all bundled up in high energy when people are coming in. But we still have to, because this is part of our culture, we still have to be able to hit that love and belonging. We want to make sure that on top of meeting all these other needs, they feel like that we appreciate them as customers. And if they're your employees, you got to meet all these needs, and they got to feel loved and belonged, safe. They got to make sure that they don't feel like they're going to lose their job. So I'm going to tell you a tale of two customers. And I really like this photo I found, because this is kind of what you see. You see the paranoid. You notice she's got the mask. She's kept her sunglasses on. She don't want anything to come to her eyes. She's got the basket out to the side. She's got her gloves. And she just really, really concerned. I do find it funny that she has on flip-flops. But we've got the paranoid type. And then we have the oblivious, the person who may be in the store who sees the little dots on the ground and doesn't care. They walk the wrong way. They're more inconvenienced, and they're maybe giving dirty looks to the person who they feel is paranoid. What we cannot forget as business owners is that, remember back to, without a business, we have an expensive hobby. We need both of these people as our customers. We need both of these people as our customers. We cannot offend them, and we have to find, how do we meet their needs? One, without judging them, and two, without making one feel bad over the other, with staying safe as employers and employees, but not offending the people who are bringing business to us.
That's so true, Judy, and because they're both right? I mean, whatever's comfortable with them, and I think it's easy maybe for the business owner to be like, whatever I view as safe, I'm going to implement in my stores, which may or may not be what's best for business. Clearly, it's not, right? But that's such an interesting thing, because most of the time, if you're owning a business or you're doing something, for the most part, your values and how you see things translate to success. I want a clean store. I want to be very welcoming and friendly. Of course, you're not rude to customers. But when it comes to safety, when it comes to some of the health stuff, because we've had such mixed messages, people have strong beliefs on what they view as safe or not, and how they view COVID or not. And it's almost like, you're hurting my independence and freedom and my liberty if you don't agree with me. But that's not the point. The point is, as you said, the point is to have business and survive and thrive.
Right. Absolutely. Now, we have a medical practice, so we do require our patients to wear masks. All of our staff wear masks. What I would say, at the very least, your employees should have masks if you have customers coming in. Remember that the masks are to protect the other people from the person wearing the mask. So what you're saying to both those customers is, we're going to protect you. You don't need to shame them if they didn't have their mask. If you want to offer a mask, it's a very good thing to do. If you have a policy where it is a medical practice, or something where you want to or need to require patients to wear a mask when they come in, then just make sure that they kind of know that ahead of time, that this is our policy, whether that is on the front door or that is in the text reminder, however you're telling them. Just because if we meet those expectations ahead of time, then we can kind of lower some of the emotional things that come behind it. And never, ever, ever, you have got to educate your employees on this. Never allow them to bring politics into the safety conversation with any customer. Don't make an assumption that that customer is on one side of the fence or the other. This has happened to me so many times. Just take the cues. They need to understand. Here's where emotional intelligence really comes in with your employees. Be in tune to the needs of that customer. How do you protect yourself? And how do you protect the customer as much as you can? But you cannot alienate them. This is incredibly important. Now, I was at another place where I had someone, and they weren't wearing a mask. I had my mask on, and I had my mask on because I had to go to this place, and I knew that they had signs that they were going to practice social distancing, but I had noticed they weren't. And I had this particular person who was servicing me come into my space, maybe 2-3 feet from me. And I stepped back, and they stepped back into my space. So train your employees. Look, take those emotional cues. Here's somebody who comes in with a mask, who's obviously saying, I want my 6-foot circle, and you need to give me my 6-foot circle. Because it could have not been me. It could have been anybody who's going to go on and write a review for your business. And you will not be able to defend it. Because remember, you may have some people who are going to agree with you, but you're also going to have all those people who don't agree with you. So here's a question we get asked a lot. Should I test my employees, yes or no? And because we see a lot of people in leadership, this has kind of been on their mind. And what I have told them, and I'm going to tell everybody here today, is, look, we'd love to have the business to be testing people, but one, it's not a good business practice to test for, do you have COVID right now? In the hope that you're going to say, my business is COVID free. And why is that? Because you could test them today. Sally hangs out with her family over the weekend, and on Monday, Sally is now infected, and you can't make false claims. So the whole test or not to test, we have got to remember that when we're testing for COVID infection, that is only as good as it is in that moment. Now, we do and have had companies say, I want to test the antibodies, the IgG antibodies. Let me test my employees, because if some people have been exposed and have high antibodies, then maybe these people could do a little more frontline work, or they'll be more comfortable at work, or it's just a kind of a peace of mind thing. Now, keep in mind that there's nothing that has come out that has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt you're immune forever if you have these antibodies. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, if you're going to provide testing and you want to do this as some kind of benefit, then it makes more sense to do IgG testing and antibody testing, but not so much testing people who aren't sick. Because even if they are exposed to COVID and they're not symptomatic yet and you test them, you could get some false negatives. So remember, there's exposure, then there's the viral load, and then you have recovery, and then you have the antibodies. So that's kind of the cycle that it goes through. And I thought I'd share a local story with you because this kind of drives home. So our sister company, Healthcare Associates of Texas, they have multiple locations, but in one of their locations, their Irving location, which is quite large, they actually have a COVID clinic. And what we had all done is decided there would be a designated place for people who were going to go in and get tested that were highly suspicious. This way they weren't mixed in with the population of our healthy patients or people coming in for heart disease, diabetes, or in our case, executive physicals and things like that. So this kind of gives you a bird's eye view of something local. And that is, they tested 2,760. Now, in order to get tested in the COVID clinic, you had to be showing signs and symptoms with risk factors that said, we think there's a strong enough chance that you have COVID that we're going to send you to a COVID clinic where we would not normally send somebody who we don't think is sick. And they would go in and get tested. Out of that, there were 299 people that tested positive for the viral load. This means they had COVID-19. Out of those, 0 deaths were reported from COVID. One of the patients who tested positive died, but it was a stroke. So we know that it wasn't they weren't on a ventilator. It wasn't for those reasons. They had other issues that kind of had led to that. And then out of the 450 employees and healthcare associates in Texas, 3 were positive, but all 3 had their exposure outside of work. So within the healthcare industry, we're doing really, really well with how are we doing our social distancing, how are we cleaning, and how are we masking, gloving, etc. And I think these numbers kind of tell us. Now, I'm speaking for locally. I cannot speak for New York City. I cannot speak for all these other places. But this gives you a very local snapshot of where we are. And then as we go forward, we need to be going with our eyes wide open. And what do I mean by that? It is not a conversation about safety or profit. You can balance them both, and that's what we have to do. We have to say, we're going to keep people safe, and we're not going to be afraid to open our business and make a profit, so that we're meeting still some of those very basic needs of employees and of customers and things. Because when there was this whole fear of where are we going to eat? How are we going to get food? What are we going to do? You have dropped everyone down to that basic level on that hierarchy chart. And when you do that, that's when you get fear. That's when you get all kinds of other emotions that are counterproductive. And as we know, the big defense, the best defense that we can have is a strong immune system. And one of the biggest immune system killers is stress. So if we can minimize our stress, that does not mean we don't pay attention or we pretend it's not happening. It means we go into the eyes wide open and say, okay, what can I do? Let me take all the precautions. And then as long as I'm doing that, I'm doing the best that I can do. There will be still people who will get this test, and they may come back positive. They may have COVID, but they also may have other things. Out of those 2,700 people 760 people that I said we tested, a lot of them tested positive for other things. We were still seeing flu. We were still seeing all kinds of other viruses. So there are still other things you can catch. And I will answer any questions that you have.
Perfect. So just for all the participants that are on, you can use the Q&A function. You can use the chat function as well if you want to be able to do that. Judy, when you did this experiment on Facebook, did you have an idea that you were going to get the responses that you got, and this was sort of affirming that, or were you just not quite sure?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I feared I would have a little of that, but I had absolutely no idea the level of emotion that would be behind it. There were people just catfighting over the subject. I mean, if somebody would post one thing, there'd be 10 more replies and little angry emojis, but then the little heart emojis. I mean, it was all over the place. And I don't think I had a full appreciation for how sensitive everyone was. But if you read all of those responses and you started thinking about those responses from the hierarchy of needs, you realize that the most emotional people were the ones who were afraid because their business was perhaps really not doing well. They had loans, they had people they were trying to pay so they could meet their basic needs. So really the fear and the anger was just a symptom of the other problem.
Yeah, well, it's certainly been stressful and difficult, and the divisiveness over health and safety to me has been shocking. I think when you're, I feel like when you're dealing with hospitals and the medical community, that's just makes sense, right? You're at a hospital or you're at a doctor's office. But when it starts getting into restaurants and other places, then it becomes a little bit more of a civil liberty issue for some people who see it one way, and then for others, it's a continuation of what's happening at the hospital and what's happening in in these other locations. So what are some of the common questions or concerns that you've been receiving? I know you've done this several times, and we have a couple of questions I'll get to in a second. But what are some of the common things you're hearing from people as you're out talking and going through this slide deck?
Well, this particular week has been very interesting because a lot of the comments and questions revolve around, oh my gosh, we've had a lot of people in large groups, we call them anthills, where lots of people gather together and it becomes small little pockets of what we see in New York City. And a lot of that has to do with the marches and things. And the fear is, are we going to have a second wave? And is that going to be because of that, or is it going to be because we open businesses? And is that going to create another wave of confusion? And what we're seeing is, yes, we are seeing some more cases. We're going to see more cases. And we really won't know until we're at that 14-day mark from when we had the last gathering to say, okay, here's what is happening here. But it just goes back to, we just have to practice social distancing and just do some common sense things. You know, even down to, how do I wear my mask? People think that they don't have to cover their nose up. Or I was in a restaurant and this one slayed me. The guy was bringing our food to the table and he took his hand and he messed with his mask because he didn't like the way it fit. And then he grabbed my plate and he handed it to me. And it was just really interesting, like, when something like that happens, how do you tactfully address it? Because if you go off, everyone in the restaurant hears it, the management hears it, this person may lose their job. You just have to find out, how do I make sure, as I'm keeping myself safe and everybody else safe, that we do these kind of things in a tactful way.
It's crazy because there's so many social norms that people know and understand as part of life in the work environment, right? It's just common courtesy. You know, you say hello to people when they walk in, you offer them a cup of coffee or whatever it is. And this is just so different. I went to a restaurant last night and the restaurant was using 2 different forms of sanitizer. So they would sanitize the table and chairs, rub it down, and then they sprayed another sanitizer that was supposed to air dry. Well, a customer came in, sat at the table, didn't really realize that the table wasn't completely dry, that it's supposed to air dry. I guess she had a cut on her elbow, put her elbow down at the table, and it started burning, and then she started getting so angry that the table was wet, and the gentleman's tried to explain to her that this is a safety precaution, and it just was, I have no doubt that we will get there, and there will be some intentionality and understanding of, you know, hey, just like the airport, hey, we've got to go through this security line now to get through, and we can't just walk back and forth like we used to greet people at the gate. We have to be a ticket passenger. So one question we got from Beth is she's wanting to know, what are the metrics to determine when PPE is no longer needed in the non-medical work environment? Is that something that we look to the governor for? Is that something based on what you mentioned, these 14 days where there's a decrease in cases? What should business owners do on the PPE front?
Well, this is where I hate to admit this, being an American, but we don't have a lot of consensus from state to state or where you have it. I think you're going to see different things in different states, just like if you look at Texas and you look at Michigan. They're very, very different how they're addressing things. So there will be different metrics that are used. I was on a call with someone from a benefits company, and their headquarters is in New York. And because of the CEO being in New York and the dialogue that's happening in New York, they're not allowed to go out on any work-related event whatsoever until September, even though he lives here in Texas and life is kind of going on just with some precautions. So I do think that those metrics are going to be state by state. I also believe that once we see things like a vaccine or a complete decline, there's some talk in the medical journals now that we're seeing some mutations, not the mutations we thought were going to happen, where we thought it's going to get stronger and we won't be able to kill it, but just quite the opposite. We're seeing mutations in this virus where it's not so lethal. People are getting it, and it's not as lethal as we thought. And that kind of goes back to how long has COVID-19 really, truly been around? And we're finding more and more out that it's been around a little bit longer than we think. And so once we know that, we can kind of start paying a little bit more attention. Because an odd thing happened in the medical community back actually at the end of December, 1st of January. Now, this is before we supposedly had COVID here. There was a lot of chatter that we were all seeing more sick people than usual. And it was, wow, is the flu, like what's going on? And they were testing negative for the flu, but they had all these symptoms that were very flu-like. So there's a lot of talk that maybe even perhaps in the United States, it was here before we knew it. And maybe just the sick, the very sick were being hospitalized, but they had comorbidities. You know, they had diabetes, they had hypertension, they had strokes, they had all these other things going on.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I've not been tested or anything, but I got sick as a dog and I could not figure out what it was, and had a friend who had come back from Spain. And so when all this happened in March, I'm like, maybe that's what I happened. So it's so interesting that you say that. Yeah. Has it been, for you, what you do is health related. And so for those people that are interested, it's relevant for them as it's health. But now health has been moved to the forefront of everything.
Right.
So has there been an increase in the amount of attention that you've received, and what it's been like having you sort of almost be the spokesperson on like an issue affecting all of society?
Well, it has been interesting because it used to be people would contact us and we'd be out, we talk to the media and such on things that were affecting them. Like, say a CEO dies of a heart attack and makes the news, and the next thing we know, we're doing all these interviews on heart disease and such. But it is interesting that most of the conversations we're having now are, how do I strengthen my immune system? What should I be worried about? Even down to, you may remember, we used to be spraying our packages on our front doorstep from Amazon. We're all learning together. What do we really need to do? What's necessary? What's not necessary? And such. And we do know, and the CDC has put this out there, that we haven't had anybody die because they went to a restaurant and they ate in a restaurant. So we have to kind of put it in context, but it has been a very interesting dynamic for healthcare providers. My husband's a physician, and most of the people that I'm around all the time are actually medical people, and we have a very medical family. And I remember one day saying, I know what a police officer or a firefighter's wife feels like, because although I'm the CEO, I'm not the person who's right there in the patient's face, or who somebody comes in for heart disease and, oh, by the way, I've been coughing for 3 weeks. What do you think? And it's kind of, oh gosh, how did this person fall through the cracks? They weren't pre-screened. So it's a different dynamic. And the focus, I think, is going to end up where it should have been all along. And that is wellness and prevention, which, we've been saying forever. There's some new research you may have seen where people with high cholesterol are at higher risk for dying, because it goes to the ACE2, not to get too medical on you, but there's a certain place that this virus attaches to. And if you have high cholesterol, the chances of you getting very ill are greater than if you didn't have high cholesterol. But, statistics are all over the place. We used to think if you had A or AB blood, you were higher risk than O blood. Statistically, that's true. But when you look at the numbers, the spread between those two, A, B, and O, they're not really relative. It's, yes, that's true, but if you put it on a grand scheme of the population, it's not necessarily that important of a difference.
Right. Well, last question for you. There's definitely been, as tragic and awful as this is, and has been for everybody economically, from a health standpoint, there have been silver linings. And so you mentioned one silver lining, which is the fact that people now have a greater understanding of what you need to be doing to take care of yourself in terms of health and wellness and hygiene and safety practices. I mean, that's going to be instilled in all of us in a new way prior to this. What other silver linings stick out for you personally or professionally that have happened as a result of COVID, and what's been a benefit that you'll look back on and say, without COVID, I wouldn't have this, or
Yeah,
we wouldn't have this?
I think there's so many things here, so many ways that we have actually improved our lives. Our families are strengthened. We all remembered how to cook. We forgot how to cook, and we all remember how to cook. And just those interactions, I can't tell you how many people told me that they hadn't had real, true conversations with their teenagers in so long. And that bond is back there, not just because everyone was kind of afraid together, but we were forced to figure it out. When this whole thing started, we said, wow, either the divorce rate's going to skyrocket or we're going to actually learn how to live together and be together. And I do think that even though there were some people that just decided they didn't want to live with people, the latter is more true, that we learned how to live together as families or extended families or even friends, how to look out for one another. It's so important. Socialization is very important, and it's important to longevity and to health. But we also realize that, gosh, if I couldn't hug my friends and I couldn't see them in person, I would miss that. So people really remember what's important. And in doing that, we really are going to actually have a longer life, because we remember what's the best thing for our family, what's the best thing for ourselves. You pay a little bit more attention when you don't exercise for 2 months. And a lot of people did this, they gained a lot of weight, and they're like, oh my gosh, I need to get back to the gym. So if you own a gym, you're probably going to do quite well in the coming months as people start getting out and getting back in shape, because they realize, oh wow, I really do need to take care of myself. And then I just had one personal thing that was a really a blessing in disguise for me, and that was, I had a book launch coming out. I wrote a memoir called Love, Life, and Lucille. And I was very concerned because I had a 5-city tour got canceled. There was something with the Four Seasons, with the Rangers, all this stuff was happening. And all of it, like overnight, just went away. And I thought, wow, 5 years, and the book launch happens to be right now. And I had a 10-second pity party, probably a little longer than that. But what I did see is that people started reading more. Not just my book, but all kinds of books. And this is a good book. They're posting, they're learning. And we kind of got away from that. So we lived in the pop-up world, just went from one thing to the next. And we didn't take time to actually delve into things like books. So from a personal standpoint, although the tour was canceled, it still went up to Amazon bestseller because people were reading. And they cared about these stories, and they cared about these relationships.
That's awesome. What a great story. Judy, I can't thank you enough for being here. Judy Gaman, everyone. Really appreciate you. Judy, tell us where, if people want to get a hold of you or talk to you more or learn more about you, about all your, I think it's 5 books you've written. Tell us how to get a hold of you.
Yes, there's 2 ways. You can go to EM Texas, spelled out, executive medicine, so emtexas.com. So that's the executive medicine site. And then if you're interested in the book I just mentioned, you can just actually go to lovelifelucille.com, and you can watch a fabulous interview with somebody over 100 that'll just make you smile.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Judy, for being here today. Y'all, that's it for Leaders Online. Thanks for joining us today. We do have some upcoming events virtually. On June 25th, if you don't know, the mayor and Fort Worth ISD, Superintendent Scribner, are going to have a workforce virtual summit about some of the things happening in education and what students are doing to get more prepared for the jobs of tomorrow. Some interesting movement on that front the last few weeks. Also, our Women's Insight Network Roundtable, we're going to have our second virtual meeting on June 26th. And then June 30th, our first virtual business after hours. That will be fun and interesting and exciting, networking over Zoom. So you can register for all of these events and learn about them on our website, fortworthchamber.com. Thanks so much for watching. Everyone be safe. Judy, thanks again, and we'll see you soon.
Take care. Stay safe, everyone.